What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to Fudge Muppet. Today's a special one because we have another brand new, never before seen Skyrim build, and she is the perfect character for all of you out there who love the exploration side of Tamriel's snowy northern province. This is the Wayfarer. The Wayfarer is a true adventurer, but unlike those who only explore the depths of their homeland, she grew up on the road, experiencing almost every culture Tamriel had to offer. Now she uses the lessons and skills taught to her all around the continent to journey across the land, leaving no stone unturned. If you also come to these builds for a fun playstyle and a unique way of taking down bandits, Forsworn, and all the other dangers Skyrim holds in store for you, you won't be disappointed either. The Wayfarer is a master marksman and uses a crossbow stocked with a range of elemental explosive bolts, and to make matters worse for her foes, she coats them in her concocted poisons and launches them in a flurry from the shadows, dealing devastating amounts of critical damage along with an array of lethal side effects. Some of the side effects you will cause, however, aren't actually lethal, allowing you to do things like frenzy opponents from afar. She's able to adapt to whatever situation is thrown at her. Now, before we get into the build, don't forget that timestamps can be found in the description just below. But with that said, let's kick things off with the Wayfarer's race, standing stone, and stats. The Wayfarer is an Imperial, and this means she can call upon the voice of the Emperor Power to calm nearby NPCs for 60 seconds once a day. This can be very helpful for those sticky situations where you've really messed up and you need to calm people down. Interestingly, while it won't affect creatures, it will affect vampires even without having illusion perks. The radius is also 75 feet, which is very neat, and it works on enemies up to level 99. Being an Imperial, the Wayfarer also has an innate knack for finding more gold. This Imperial luck means she will have a 100% chance of finding 2 to 10 extra gold in all chests that normally contain gold, and also in corpses of gold dropping enemies. This makes sense with the whole dungeon crawling feel this build has to it. Early in the game, use the Lover or the Thief Stone depending on which skills you care about improving rapidly. Obviously Thief Stone for the Thief skills and Lover Stone if you just want an even split. Then later in the game, use the Shadow Stone. The Wayfarer doesn't use magic, so being able to go invisible once a day can be a massive advantage. It will also save you some invisibility potions down the line. Obviously, if you want to be as sturdy and statistically powerful as possible defensively, or find yourself getting melted down by mages, the Atronach Stone is always there for you should you come calling. As for the stat spread, you'll want to put 60% into health to keep this build alive, but that should be enough, as sneaking will hopefully stop you from taking many hits. Put the rest into stamina. Magicka isn't needed for the build, and stamina will be really helpful for slowing time with the crossbow, zooming with it, and sprinting and sneak rolling all the time. Sprinting around also makes sense for roleplaying because we're a character who will end up great at traveling long distances on foot. Having heaps of stamina is also super fun. Just being able to slow time down for so long with your crossbow is beast, but if you really don't care and just want to be as strong as possible, you could go 70% health and 30% stamina instead. The Wayfarer was actually born in Gideon, the westernmost city in the province of Blackmarsh. Her father was an ambassador for the Empire and had just been tasked with keeping positive relations with the Argonians. In terms of the timeline, this was just after the signing of the White Gold Concordat. His job had been so urgent, in fact, that he had no choice but to bring his heavily pregnant wife, lest he miss out on the birth of his first child altogether. The first face the Wayfarer saw when she entered the world was the grey-green scales of the Argonian midwife. Due to her father's profession, the Wayfarer was exposed to a diverse array of cultures from the moment she was born, and then all throughout her youth and upbringing. The Wayfarer's father knew he had his work cut out for him these days. The Empire was not as prosperous as it had been, and should an opportunistic bordering province seek to take Cyrodiil, it would cause a whole list of brand new problems for the recovering Empire. And so, with his wife and his newborn daughter, he traveled the east border of Cyrodiil, meeting with influential figures in Blackmarsh and Morrowind. As the Wayfarer aged, she developed a love for the road. One week she was surrounded by the Imperials of the Niben, the next she was ducking below mushrooms in the alien expanses of the Narcissus Uplands. Even when they headed south, bound for elsewhere in Valenwood, the young Wayfarer decided to stay on with her father. You see, her mother was taken home to Breville to tend to the homestead, but the Wayfarer wanted to journey on with her father, feeling the familiar bumps of the road on her backside. Her father was an intelligent man, and while they traveled with guards for protection, he still taught his daughter how to look after herself. She wouldn't have the strength to fend off battle axe wielding highwaymen, but she rapidly picked up how to spot suspicious activity on the road and how to read someone's mannerisms and predict mimicked their behavior. She was well into her later teenage years by this stage, and unlike most teenage girls her age, she had seen enough to lose much of her innocence. Traveling on a wagon was much like marching in an army. Those who wished to attack you would wait in the wings, hiding in the forests, and without effective scouts, an army would be vanquished just as a wagon would be looted and burned to cinders. It all began to make sense to the Wayfarer. They may have had some manpower, but being vigilant and observant was equally as important. There had been several times in the past where she had been locked in the carriage while the sound of steel and men screaming rang from outside. Her father was no stranger to highwaymen, and now it was time for her to help be his lookout. When they finally reached elsewhere, or more accurately, the northern state of Anaquina, as it was now known since the Khajiit split from the Empire, the Wayfarer was once again blown away by the culture. She thought she'd seen it all, but every province proved her more and more wrong. On their first day in Riverhold, the Wayfarer went with her father to a local merchant. On the counter slept a small black cat. The Wayfarer reached out to pat it before her father grabbed her wrist. The cat turned and nodded towards the other Khajiit in the shop, excited at the prospect of customers. Her father handed over a dense purse of gold, and in exchange he received a beautiful, masterfully crafted crossbow. He gave it to the Wayfarer, a gift for his new scout. In Elsewhere, she experienced the various species of Khajiit, and from then on knew that what she thought was a simple house cat in the shop was actually one of those species. Her father worked here for a couple of years, and the Wayfarer found this quite annoying. She loved spending time in this new and exciting province, but she was used to a more nomadic lifestyle, and 2 years in one province for her felt like a lifetime. Obviously, she had spent many years of her life in the provinces on the east of Tamriel, but this time she spent was collected in various clusters, going up and down to various places, even frequenting the same cities multiple times. None of these visits had lasted for multiple years at a time, though. The Wayfarer even developed a social circle in Elsewhere, making friends with many Khajiit teenagers. One of the male ones she became particularly close with. They weren't romantic or anything like that, but he also loved to explore, and being a local, he was able to show her all of the coolest places to see. A lot of the time they were trespassing, but the Wayfarer wasn't fussed. Her Khajiit friend could detect a presence incredibly fast, and they'd be out of there before you could say skooma. Many of the places they visited actually lay in areas beyond locked gates. Due to this, being able to pick locks was a valuable skill for Elsewhere explorers, and the Wayfarer picked up the basics from her buddy. Eventually, like many of her friendships though, this one would also come to an end. Perhaps they'd meet again, but for now it was time to move on. The Wayfarer and her father finally took off, heading west for Valenwood, and rather than sitting idly inside the carriage watching the world go by, the Wayfarer sat at the front, scouring the surrounding wilderness for any suspicious activity. She was a fully grown young adult by this stage, but still kept the curiosity of a child, and she was more than happy to get going and explore somewhere new. She was used to leaving new friends behind. Valenwood didn't disappoint, and the Wayfarer learned even more of the races of Tamriel. In Aranthia, they met merchants who traveled with a huge train of carriages and carts stocked with all manners of riches and commodities. One of these merchants took a shine to the Wayfarer and her crossbow, and offered her a job as one of his personal caravan guards. The Wayfarer leapt at the opportunity of making her own way and having her own income. Her father, though, as you'd expect, wasn't having any of it, but the Wayfarer wore him down. The caravan left, though, saying they would return in a few months, and that if she was available, they'd love to have her along. The father feared for his daughter's safety. She may have a brand new crossbow, but she didn't really know how to use it. After many arguments and much deliberation that she was old enough to work an honest living, the Wayfarer convinced her father to let her travel as a paid guard. The catch was that she needed to undertake training with a local wood elf in order to actually be competent at her job and to stay safe. The Wayfarer obviously agreed. It would have been foolish for her to just leave with these people without being combat proficient. So 3 months passed, and the Wayfarer was taught how to use her crossbow. Her teacher much preferred using a traditional bow, but due to the hefty payment from the Wayfarer's father, couldn't complain about teaching the girl how to use a crossbow. He also taught her how to make some basic potions and poisons by using imported ingredients. He wasn't the kind of wood elf who would harm the forest he lived in, but he wasn't an overly devout Green Pact follower either. Eventually the merchants and guards returned, and the Wayfarer knew it was time to go. She agreed to work for them the next morning and parted ways with her father with a kiss. She prayed to the divines for luck on her new adventure, and the train of carriages set out for Cyrodiil, specifically the western Clovian cities of Skingrad and Kvatch. They joined the Gold Road just east of Skingrad, and it was here that the Wayfarer's mettle was put to the test for the first time. She stood atop the cart at the front of the group and noticed movement in the bushes to the right. Behind the trees stood a number of bandits, and several of them had begun to knock arrows to their bows. In Blackmarsh and Valenwood, they used poisons to enhance their throwing knives and arrows, and the Wayfarer had spent a hefty chunk of her first pay on poisons for a bolts, but she realized in that instant that it would take her far too long to apply one to her bolts and reload fast enough to stop all 3 of the archers huddled in the undergrowth. As she lingered on the thought, she saw the first archer stand up in full view, drawing the bow to his chin. She had to act. She reached into a pouch and pulled out a vial of poison, a paralyzed poison. The exceptionally green hue of the fluid was unmistakable. She pulled free the stopper and tossed the vial towards the highwaymen. The vial missed by a hair's breadth and hit the tree next to them. It exploded in a brilliant shower of glass shards and poison, and the substance sprayed all over the 2 of the archers. They screamed and then fell silent, paralyzed by the poison. And then she reached for her crossbow, and with unrivaled speed, she let a bolt loose into the remaining highwayman, burying the projectile deep between his eyes, as if a feathered horn had just grown from his forehead. It had gone perfectly, and they hadn't lost a man or a horse. That was one of the only encounters they had with bandits throughout their travels in Western Cyrodiil, and when the business dried up, they decided it was time to move on. Civil war had started in Skyrim, and the Wayfarer thought of her father. He would be unbelievably busy in such trying times. Perhaps he'd even be moved there, who would know? The caravan decided to venture north to capitalize on the inevitable arms race and shortage of good materials that would be plaguing Skyrim. Their journey went well at first, but high in the Dural Mountains, their progress was slowed by a thick blizzard. The Wayfarer scouted ahead as usual, but it was so hard to protect against threats when you could see so little in any direction. She eventually managed to get separated from the train of caravans, and when she thought she saw a cart in the distance, it turned out to be under Imperial control, and she was caught up by their patrol, mistaken as a Stormcloak sellsword. After escaping Helgen, the Wayfarer will get back to doing what she's always done, exploring. You will roleplay that she writes to her father explaining what has happened, and decides not to return to him due to getting caught up in the Dragonborn prophecy. Obviously, not knowing where he's stationed, she will just be writing to Valenwood. You can decide whether or not she hears back from him. In terms of roleplaying, she's not oblivious to the fact that Skyrim is an incredibly dangerous place at this time, and she will prioritize practicing her archery and getting her hands on a powerful crossbow as soon as possible. She can't rely on a train of armed merchants and guards to back her up anymore, so she will be adventuring alone, at least for the meantime. Eventually that can be solved with companions if you want pals to journey with. She will enjoy interacting with everyone too. Due to her upbringing on the road, meeting men, mer, and beast folk alike, she will be no stranger to new cultures and customs, and won't feel any disdain towards anyone, unless they're trying to kill her, of course. She is relatively kind and moral, and she isn't particularly political. She sees the folly on each side as well as their strengths. If she does involve herself in the Civil War, it will probably be with the Imperial Legion, as their survival is the best for her father. But generally speaking, she will make money on her travels by protecting people rather than engaging in killing. As a well-traveled individual, she'll take an interest in everyone, and many of the Khajiit, Argonian, or Bosmer inhabitants in Skyrim will likely be surprised by her birthplace and her understanding of their culture. She respects the divines, especially Kinnereth, and has an affinity with nature, but not to any green-packed extremes. She will gladly harvest plants and also animal products if they help with her alchemical creations and survival. Obviously, she'll play as a very diverse build, having learned a bit of lockpicking from Khajiit during her time in Elsewhere, and a bit of marksmanship and alchemy in Valenwood. The most fun aspect of the Wayfarer's roleplaying is that she will go where her feet take her, following the roads less traveled in search of wonder. As for factions, the Dawnguard will be her primary choice. She will undoubtedly sympathize with their goals, and will commit her marksmanship skills to the cause. This will also allow you to get a crossbow really quickly. She will also follow the main story in the Dragonborn DLC. What better adventure could there be than stepping into the shoes of a prophetic hero? The thought of seeing the world from atop a dragon gets her more than a little bit excited. She will join the companions and accept the werewolf form, intending to use the abilities for good. If there ever came a time where she really couldn't control it, maybe she'd reconsider, but by no means do you have to accept the curse. The build is perfectly viable without it if you choose not to use it. How you deal with factions like the Dark Brotherhood is up to you. While they are nefarious and immoral, there's no real incentive to be in the situation to track them down and kill them in the first place, unless you happen to find an assassination contract with your name on it. The Thieves Guild is also a little skewed away from her moral compass, but as a sneaky lockpicking character, she would excel if you choose to justify it in the role-playing. The Wayfarer will be exploring plenty, so do all of the side quests you stumble upon, as a lot of this build will be random questing to explore more and discover new locations. Even though you'll be a generally pleasant person, you're by no means a pushover, and you can follow some badass quest lines like Hersey cutscenes with your werewolf powers and your skill with a crossbow. But just as a side note, she's definitely not a Hercene worshipper. The best aspect of the werewolf form is to help with traveling long distances in line with the Wayfarer theme. It can also be used to help her flee or to kill attackers if she has no other choice. Make sure you do the Kind's Sacred Trials quest too. Well then, now that we have the Wayfarer's backstory, roleplaying, and factions, let's get into how that will affect her skills, perks, and her overall playstyle. The main skills for this build will be archery, alchemy, sneak, lockpicking, light armor, and smithing. So you've got 6 for this character. Of course, the Wayfarer is not a mage and won't be using any spells, but there are a few shouts you could get a lot of use out of. First, Whirlwind Sprint really fits the vibe. With it, you can travel distances and reach hard to get places, or even use it in combat to get a new angle or keep pesky melee foes at bay. There's also the Animal Allegiance shout, which fits in with some of the roleplaying, and Stormcore could be a handy addition if you're looking for more, but with those specified, here's the important stuff, the Wayfarer's essential perks. Life on the road can be tough, but it also has its benefits. The Wayfarer found herself meeting a variety of different races with a plethora of unique skills and distinct cultures. She spent time in Valenwood with renowned archers. Her trainer gave her all the skills she needed to become a master crossbow user. From the archery skill tree, take absolutely everything. Eagle Eye and Steady Hand are 2 great perks for improving your accuracy, as they allow you to zoom and slow time by 50% when using the crossbow. Also, Bullseye works perfectly alongside your poisons, as it gives you an additional 15% chance to paralyze a foe with each hit. In order to protect her traveling companions and the carriages from thieves, bandits, highwaymen, and crooks, a scout like the Wayfarer needs to have a keen eye and a very light foot. Exploring with the Khajiit she met in Elsewhere definitely helped her stealth game. She'll build upon it in Skyrim to become a silent killer. Sneak is an essential skill, giving her archery the bonus of powerful sneak attacks. From the sneak skill tree, you'll want to take everything except for Assassin's Blade. The big one here is Deadly Aim, as your crossbow sneak attacks will now deal 3 times as much normal damage. Sneak multipliers improve the ferocity of the Wayfarer's crossbow bolts, but that isn't all. The Wayfarer adds an extra bite to each projectile thanks to the use of expertly brewed potions and poisons. From the alchemy skill tree, take everything once again. Concentrated poison is one standout here, as it allows poisons to work for twice as many hits, and with crossbow bolts, that is even more meaningful. Also, purity is great for keeping positive effects out of your poisons and negative effects out of your potions. You'll be making potions to increase your archery skill and thus your crossbow damage. Another skill the Wayfarer picked up from the Khajiit friend she had was the art of lockpicking, and outside of combat, the Wayfarer will never find her path blocked. With this skill, she can traverse the land of Skyrim unhindered, and anything less wouldn't be good enough for this true adventurer. From the lockpicking skill tree, take the main branch up to Master Locks. With these perks, every lock in the game will be much easier to pick. In order to stay light on her feet for traveling and for sneaking, light armor is a wanderer's best friend. Obviously, you could be lighter and sneak better with no armor, but you still have to have some sort of protection. Therefore, the Wayfarer will shun heavy armor in favor of the light stuff. From the light armor skill tree, take 5 ranks of Agile Defender to double your light armor rating. Lastly, we have smithing, and this is the skill that will allow her to vastly improve her weapons and armor. From the bone-carved bows of the Bosma to the perfectly crafted steel of the Nords, the Wayfarer will see it all, and will apply everything she has seen into her own work. From the smithing skill tree, follow the left-hand side around to dragon smithing. Once you get that, you'll be able to craft your dragon scale gear. So with all these skills, shouts, and perks combined, you can get an idea of how the Wayfarer will play in combat. Make as many potions and poisons as possible before getting into fights, and then use stealth to snipe enemies from a safe distance. You can use elemental bolts when appropriate, like pulling out the fire bolts against trolls or most enemy types, to be honest, shock bolts against mages, and frost against mobile melee opponents. You know the drill. Roll around shooting from the shadows, and if the cover is blown, you can still do damage as long as you keep a little space between you and everyone else. Your bolts should always be poisoned with things like paralysis, frenzy, damage health, and slowing effects. If things get dicey, you can pull out your trump card, the werewolf form. Outside of combat, you'll be exploring plenty, and this can be made much easier with the speed of werewolf form and the whirlwind sprint ability for tricky movements. So you've got that form, you've got your shouts, and also, as I mentioned earlier, you do have the voice of the Emperor power if you do want to calm everyone down. Lastly, we have the Wayfarer's gear, and she'll be kitted out in the Rift and Guard armor. The armor has a really cool look on female characters, looking more scaly, which fits alongside the dragon scale. Then add dragon scale boots and gauntlets. All of these pieces should be smithed up, and the dragon scale ones can be forged entirely by you when your smithing skill is good enough. Wear the Ring of Bloodlust as your first piece of jewelry. This will drastically improve your werewolf abilities, even though you won't be in werewolf form that often, but it is a nice backup when things get tough. The other piece of jewelry is the Amulet of Kinnereth. This fits role-playing, but also gives you a small stamina boost boost for your archery. As for weapons, you'll be using an enhanced dwarven crossbow with exploding dwemer bolts of fire, frost, and shock. These are situationally interchangeable, but predominantly you'll be using fire bolts. Obviously, if you can, smith up this dwarven crossbow. Other things you'll need to carry in abundance include potions to improve your sneak, to go invisible, and to increase archery damage, and then poisons to paralyze, slow, frenzy, and damage enemies from a distance. And there you have it, guys. Subscribe to Fudge Muppet if you're new and like what you saw, and show us your support by giving this video a thumbs up. It means so much to us if you enjoyed it. Timestamps to help you move throughout the video can be found just below in the description, along with all the links to our social media accounts, our Twitch, Patreon, and all the other good stuff. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.